Have you ever looked at the person sleeping next to you, listening to the soft rhythmic sound of their breathing in the dark, and suddenly realized you are sharing a bed with a complete stranger? It is a terrifying thought, the kind that makes your chest tighten and your throat go completely dry. You lie there staring at the ceiling, wondering how a life you spent years building could turn into a fragile house of cards, ready to collapse from a single breath. Drop a comment below and let me know where you are listening from tonight. I genuinely need to know I am not alone in this dark room right now, because what I am about to share with you is the raw, unvarnished truth of how my entire world turned to absolute ash in a matter of seconds. If you find yourself connecting with my story, or if you have ever had to survive a betrayal that nearly broke you, please take a second to subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything to me as I try to rebuild my life from the ground up. My name is Gavin Cross, and for 6 years I thought I was living the definitive version of the American dream. I had a stable, predictable job as a senior data analyst for a supply chain logistics firm, a position that required me to spend my days staring at spreadsheets, identifying subtle anomalies, and fixing microscopic errors before they became catastrophic problems. It was tedious work, but it paid well enough to buy a beautiful colonial-style home with a wraparound porch in a quiet tree-lined suburb just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. More importantly, my job allowed me to provide a comfortable life for my wife, Sienna. Sienna was everything I wasn't. Where I was quiet, analytical, and prone to blending into the background, she was radiant, charismatic, and filled the room with an infectious energy. She worked as an independent corporate event coordinator, a fast-paced career that suited her outgoing personality perfectly. We met during our senior year of college, back when we had nothing but a shared love for cheap Thai takeout and an old dented Honda Civic that barely started in the winter. We survived the brutal grind of our 20s together, counting pennies, working late nights, and constantly promising each other that one day all the sacrifice would be worth it. When we finally signed the deed to our house, I remember carrying her over the threshold, both of us crying tears of pure exhaustion and joy. I trusted her with my life, my finances, and my soul. I truly believed that our foundation was unbreakable. Then came a random rainy Tuesday evening that changed the trajectory of my life forever. Sienna was out attending what she described as a high-profile networking gala downtown. I was home alone, sitting at the kitchen island with a lukewarm cup of coffee, working through a backlog of corporate expense reports. My personal phone buzzed against the marble countertop. It was an automated notification from our smart home security application, the system we had installed to monitor the property while we traveled. Usually these alerts were triggered by a stray neighborhood cat crossing the driveway or a delivery driver dropping off a package at the front door. But this notification was different. It flagged an audio anomaly captured by the secondary exterior microphone located near the detached garage, an area where the cellular signal was notoriously weak. Curious, I unlocked my phone and tapped the media playback button. It was a digital audio file exactly 12 seconds long. When the audio began, all I could hear was the heavy rhythmic patter of rain striking the aluminum gutters, accompanied by the muffled crunch of gravel beneath a pair of designer heels. Sienna had evidently stepped away from the main porch to make a private call before heading to her car. Then her voice cut through the static. It wasn't the warm, affectionate tone she used when she spoke to me, nor was it the polished, professional voice she adopted for her corporate clients. It was a low, breathless, incredibly intimate whisper that sent an immediate chill straight down my spine. "Don't call while he's home," she whispered. A sharp, suffocating pause stretched across the recording for 4 agonizing seconds. The only sound was her shallow breathing, heavy with an anxiety that felt entirely foreign to the woman I knew. Then she spoke again, her voice dropping even lower, laced with a terrifying familiarity. "I'll message you when the garage door closes tomorrow morning. I love you." A heavy, definitive digital click echoed through the speaker. The remaining 3 seconds of the file returned to the ambient sound of falling rain, fading slowly into absolute silence. I sat there frozen in the kitchen, the phone hovering inches from my face. My brain, trained for years to analyze data and reject anomalies, completely locked up. I replayed the file. 12 seconds. I played it a third time, then a fourth, pressing the speaker directly against my ear until the low frequency of her voice vibrated against my skull. "Don't call while he's home." There was no ambiguity. There was no alternative interpretation that could save me from the reality of what I was hearing. The he was me. The house was mine. The life I thought we shared was an elaborate, beautifully orchestrated illusion. A wave of intense physical nausea hit me so hard, I had to press both hands flat against the cold marble counter to keep from sliding out of my chair. My chest felt as though it were being crushed beneath a massive invisible weight, a raw say-long pain that made it impossible to draw a full breath. Every single memory I possessed of our recent past began to warp and distort right before my eyes, turning into a sickening montage of deception. I didn't storm out of the house. I didn't smash the coffee mug against the wall. Instead, the analytical risk assessment side of my brain, the part of me that survived by compartmentalizing chaos, kicked into overdrive. I realized with absolute clarity that a premature confrontation would ruin me. If I confronted her right then with nothing but a vague 12-second audio clip from a driveway microphone, she would easily construct a lie to explain it away. She would claim it was a prank, a misunderstanding, or a conversation with a stressed girlfriend using a figure of speech. She would call me paranoid, gaslight me into doubting my own senses, and immediately scrub every piece of digital evidence from her devices. I needed to know the full extent of the rot. I needed to map the boundaries of her lies, and to do that, I had to become a ghost in my own home. I had to look at her every single day, sit across from her at the dinner table, kiss her forehead, and pretend that my heart wasn't bleeding out onto the floor. When Sienna returned home later that night around 11 o'clock, I was waiting in the living room with the lights dimmed, a half-read book resting on my lap. The front door clicked open, and she stepped into the foyer, shaking the rain from her umbrella. She looked breathtakingly beautiful, her dark hair pinned back, her cheeks flushed from the chilly evening air. She smiled warmly when she saw me walking over to the couch to lean down and press her lips against my cheek. "Hey, honey," she murmured, her voice carrying the faint sweet scent of white wine and a heavy expensive cologne that I knew for a fact didn't belong to me. "You're up late. I told you not to wait up for me. The gala ran so much longer than expected, and the traffic on the interstate was an absolute nightmare because of the construction." For the first time in our marriage, I didn't just listen to her words, I analyzed them. I watched the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in her fingers as she adjusted her necklace. I noticed how her eyes darted toward her purse, which she kept tightly zipped and slung securely over her shoulder. "It's fine," I said, forcing my voice to maintain its usual even low-key cadence. "Just finishing up some work. How was the event?" "Productive, but exhausting," she replied, already turning away from me to head toward the stairs, avoiding sustained eye contact. "A lot of local business owners looking to scale up their marketing events for the third quarter. I'm going to take a hot shower and head straight to bed." "Sounds good. I'll be up in a minute," I called out after her. As soon as her footsteps faded up the stairs and the bathroom door clicked shut, I pulled out my laptop. The micro-investigation had officially begun. I knew I couldn't access her phone without her noticing, but I had full administrative access to our home network routers, our shared financial records, and our cellular billing statements. I spent the next 3 hours sitting in the dark, downloading digital PDF copies of our itemized phone bills spanning the last 6 months. I began cross-referencing her daily routine against the data. I knew her schedule inside and out, or at least I thought I did. Sienna always claimed she left her home office around 8:30 in the morning to beat the rush hour traffic down to the city center. According to her, she spent her mornings in face-to-face consultations and her afternoons scouting potential venues for upcoming corporate functions. But as I scrolled through the raw call logs, a terrifying pattern began to emerge from the numbers. Every single morning without fail, precisely 3 minutes after our smart garage door signaled that her car had exited the driveway, her phone registered an outgoing call to an unlisted recurring 10-digit number. These calls weren't short professional check-ins. They lasted 40, 50, sometimes 80 minutes, the exact duration of her morning commute. I stared at the repeating sequence of digits on the glowing screen. The number didn't have a name attached to it on our shared family plan billing sheet, but it appeared multiple times a day, every single day for months. It was dialed at 8:33 a.m. It was dialed again at 12:15 p.m. during her supposed lunch meetings. And most disturbingly, it was dialed late at night on Thursdays, the specific days she claimed she had to host late-night client dinners downtown. The lies were systemic. They weren't a recent lapse in judgment or a momentary mistake. They were a deeply ingrained, highly organized part of her daily existence. The realization that she could sit next to me on the couch, watch a movie, hold my hand, and then step into her car the next morning to spend an hour pouring her heart out to another man was a level of sociopathy I couldn't comprehend. The emotional depth of our entire 6-year marriage was being actively erased by a stranger on the other end of a phone line. The next morning, I woke up early, my eyes burning from a complete lack of sleep. I watched her from across the bedroom as she stood in front of the vanity mirror, carefully applying her makeup, humming a cheerful melody under her breath. She looked completely at peace, entirely unburdened by the weight of the massive deception she was carrying. "Do you have a busy day today?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe, holding a mug of black coffee to keep my hands from shaking. Sienna caught my eye in the mirror and offered a warm, flawless smile. "Oh, absolutely brutal, babe. I have to drive all the way out to the north side of the city to check on a new outdoor pavilion project. The client is being incredibly demanding about the landscaping layout, so I'll probably be stuck on site until late this afternoon. Don't wait up for lunch, okay?" "Of course," I murmured, nodding slowly. "Take your time. Make sure the layout is perfect." I watched her pack her leather briefcase, slip her phone into her pocket, and kiss me goodbye on her way out the door. I stood by the kitchen window, pulling back the blinds just enough to watch her white SUV back out of the driveway. The moment the vehicle cleared the curb, I checked the smart home application on my phone. The digital log recorded the exact second the garage door closed, 8:30 a.m. I stood motionless in the center of the quiet kitchen, counting the seconds in my head. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. At exactly 8:33 a.m., I knew with absolute certainty that her phone was ringing, connecting her to the person she had begged not to call while I was home. The routine was clockwork. The timeline was completely flawless, and the sheer predictability of her betrayal was the weapon I needed to use against her. I took a deep breath, walked down the hallway into my home office, and pulled open the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet. I bypassed our standard tax folders, our medical records, and our homeowner's insurance policy documents. Instead, I reached for a small, unmarked USB drive that contained the administrative backup keys to our shared cloud storage accounts, an account that synced her tablet and older work laptop to our home server. My hands were cold, but my mind was sharper than it had been in years. I plugged the drive into my laptop, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, as the system began to pull the encrypted data streams from the local network backups. The screen flickered to life, casting a cold blue glow across the dark wood of my desk as the progress bar slowly crawled toward 100%. My heart hammered against my ribs, a dull, heavy thudding that seemed to echo in the quiet vacuum of the empty house. Watching those files decrypt felt like pulling back a heavy curtain on a stage I never wanted to look at, yet I couldn't tear my eyes away. The local server finally chirped, a small, cheerful sound that signaled the complete synchronization of Sienna's digital footprint onto my machine. I bypassed her professional emails and went straight for the media caches, specifically the automated image and message backups from her personal tablet. The folder structures were laid out before me, organized by date and time, a pristine digital timeline of my own undoing. I clicked on a hidden directory labeled with a generic system tag, a clumsy attempt at concealment for someone who believed her husband would never have a reason to doubt her. What I found inside wasn't just a collection of flirtatious messages. It was a full-blown archive of a parallel life. There were photographs, dozens of them. They weren't taken in crowded downtown restaurants or public spaces where someone might recognize her. They were taken inside a half-finished house surrounded by exposed drywall stacks of timber and raw concrete floors. It was our house, or rather the major expansion project we had broken ground on 6 months ago. And standing right next to her in every single frame, his arm draped casually over her waist with an insufferable air of possession, was Tristan Cole. Tristan wasn't an anonymous stranger from a corporate gala. He was the independent luxury landscape architect and structural designer we had hired to transform our backyard into a private oasis, complete with a custom pavilion and an in-ground pool. He was a man I had personally interviewed, a man whose hand I had shaken right on our front porch. I remembered inviting him into our kitchen, opening premium craft beers for him, and listening to him talk passionately about his vision for our property. I had trusted his expertise, writing massive checks from our joint investment account to finance his premium blueprints. Seeing his smug bearded face smiling back at me from the screen felt like a physical blow to the solar plexus. The sheer audacity of the betrayal was suffocating. While I was sitting at my corporate desk analyzing supply chain metrics to ensure we could afford his exorbitant fees, he was using my own home, my own resources, and my own wife to construct a humiliating joke at my expense. My mind flashed back to the countless weekend afternoons over the spring when I would leave the two of them alone at the house. Sienna would always insist that I should go enjoy a round of golf with my buddies or visit my brother 2 hours away. "You work so hard during the week, Gavin," she would say, her eyes wide and full of gentle persuasion as she adjusted the collar of my shirt. "Let me handle the dirty work with Tristan. I'll stay behind and supervise the concrete pours and the timber deliveries so you don't have to waste your Saturday." I had thought she was being incredibly supportive, shielding me from the stress of a chaotic construction site. In reality, I was practically handing them the keys to our marital bed, clearing the schedule so they could turn our future home into their private playground. I scrolled further down the directory, opening a text transcript file that had synced from her messaging application. The dialogue between them was raw, unfiltered, and deeply revealing. They didn't just talk about their affection for one another. They talked about me with a chilling level of detachment, treating me like an annoying obstacle, an administrative hurdle that needed to be managed until the timing was perfect for a clean break. One particular exchange from 3 weeks ago made my blood run entirely cold. "Tristan, how much is left in the equity line of credit?" "Sienna, just under 70,000. I'm approving the final draw for the pavilion masonry this afternoon. Gavin won't even look at the ledger until tax season next year. He trusts me completely." "Tristan, perfect. Once the masonry is finished and the appraisal comes back, the property value jumps 40%. We lock down the private account you file the papers, and he's stuck trying to buy you out of a house he can't afford on his salary alone." "Sienna, I know he has no idea. He just sits there in his office looking at his stupid data sheets. It's almost sad how easy this is." Reading those words, the last lingering shards of my grief mutated into a freezing, calculated rage. The woman I had struggled alongside, the partner who had held my hand in a tiny, drafty apartment while we split a single order of noodles, had completely vanished. In her place was a predatory stranger who was actively plotting to financially cripple me, using my own blind trust as the ultimate leverage to strip away everything I had earned. They weren't just sleeping together, they were executing a slow-motion corporate raid on my life. I began expanding my search, diving deeper into the financial logs attached to her personal cloud backup. I found digital receipts from boutique hotels in Savannah and Asheville, places she claimed she had visited for regional event planner conferences. Every single reservation matched a weekend where I had stayed home, keeping the house clean and waiting for her to return, entirely ignorant of the fact that my hard work was funding her romantic getaways. There were also orders for expensive male wardrobe items, designer watches, and high-end construction tools sent to an alternative P.O. box downtown. She was using our shared cash reserves to subsidize Tristan's lifestyle and his business. It wasn't just an affair of the heart or the flesh. It was a systematic siphoning of our life savings. Every text message between them was a calculated step toward my destruction, a blueprint designed to leave me with a massive mortgage on a house I would be forced to sell, while she walked away with a massive payout. I closed the laptop, my breathing finally slowing down into a calm, steady rhythm. The immense pain that had threatened to break my ribs the night before was gone, replaced by a sharp clinical focus. I knew exactly how the legal system worked in North Carolina regarding marital assets and infidelity. It was an equitable distribution state, meaning the division of property wasn't just a simple 50-50 split. The court looked at the conduct of both parties, especially when it came to the dissipation of marital funds for non-marital purposes. I picked up my phone and made a call to a number a trusted colleague had given me months ago during a casual conversation about a messy corporate divorce. It belonged to Raymond Finch, an elite, notoriously aggressive family law attorney known throughout the region for his brutal efficiency in high-asset cases. 2 hours later, I was sitting in a corner office on the top floor of a glass tower downtown, presenting Attorney Finch with a neatly organized digital folder containing the 12-second driveway audio, the detailed call logs, the synced photographs, and the financial text transcripts. Finch looked through the data, his expression remaining entirely unreadable as his fingers tapped against his gold fountain pen. When he finally looked up, a slow, grim smile spread across his weathered face. "Your wife and her companion are incredibly arrogant, Mr. Cross," Finch said, his voice dropping into a low, gravelly baritone that radiated absolute authority. "And that arrogance is going to be their complete undoing. If you had confronted her last night, she would have liquidated that equity line of credit by noon today and moved it into an offshore or untraceable account. But because you kept your mouth shut, we have the upper hand. What's the strategy? I asked, leaning forward, my hands gripping the edge of the leather chair. We don't file yet, Finch replied, leaning back and looking out the window at the city skyline. We let them finish the house. Let Mr. Cole pour his own time, labor, and resources into maximizing your property value. In the meantime, I am going to petition for a forensic audit of your joint accounts quietly under the radar. We will document every single dollar she spent on him, every hotel room, every dinner, every piece of landscaping material she authorized, using your marital credit lines. When we strike, it will be a coordinated financial freeze. She won't have enough liquidity to pay for a parking spot, let alone a defense attorney. And what do I do until then? Finch looked me dead in the eye, his gaze piercing. You go home. You look at her. You eat the dinner she cooks. You tell her you love her, and you play the part of the oblivious, trusting husband perfectly. Can you do that, Gavin? I can. I whispered the word, tasting like iron in my mouth. Driving back to the suburbs that afternoon, the North Carolina humidity hung heavy in the air, signaling an impending summer storm. I pulled into our driveway, my eyes scanning the massive, half-finished pavilion structure rising up behind our detached garage. Timber beams stood tall against the gray sky, and fresh stone blocks were stacked neatly on the lawn. It looked beautiful, a true testament to Tristan Cole's impeccable design skills. I smiled to myself, a dark, humorless smile, realizing that every nail driven into that wood was another nail in the coffin of my wife's future. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the air-conditioned silence of the house. From the kitchen, I could hear the upbeat, lively sound of Sienna's voice. She was on the phone laughing softly at something the person on the other end had said. The moment the front door clicked shut, her laughter ceased, instantly replaced by a sharp, tense silence. I have to go, the shipments are arriving, she said quickly into the receiver, her tone shifting into her practiced professional corporate voice before hanging up. She walked into the foyer, a sparkling glass of iced tea in her hand, her eyes instantly scanning my face for any sign of suspicion. Hey, sweetie, you're home early. I thought you had a massive logistics review this afternoon. They rescheduled it, I said smoothly, stepping forward to wrap my arms around her waist, pulling her close against my chest. I felt her body stiffen slightly, an instinctive microscopic pullback that she immediately tried to mask by resting her head against my shoulder. Oh, that's wonderful, she murmured, her hand gently stroking the back of my neck. You look tired, babe. Is everything okay at the office? Everything is perfect, I lied, looking past her shoulder toward the back window where the heavy clouds were finally beginning to break, letting a single sharp beam of sunlight strike the unfinished concrete foundations outside. The warmth of her skin beneath my palms felt entirely artificial, like a thin layer of wax covering an empty vault. I maintained my embrace for 2 additional seconds, forcing my breathing to match her slow, deceptive rhythm before stepping back with a tired, casual smile. Over the next 48 days, that hallway became the boundary line of my sanity. I became an expert at living a double life, in reverse executing a silent counteroffensive, while checking the home security logs every evening to ensure my digital traps remained completely undetected. Every morning the routine played out with chilling mathematical precision. The white SUV would back out onto the asphalt at exactly 8:30, the heavy aluminum garage door would rattle down into its tracks, and by 8:33 her secondary phone line would light up the cellular towers downtown. But now I spent my lunch breaks sitting in my vehicle at the edge of the corporate parking lot, reviewing the daily updates sent to an encrypted email address by Attorney Finch's private forensic accounting team. They were digging through years of buried transactions like archaeologists unearthing a ruined site. The financial quarantine was a masterclass in legal chess. Because our primary checking and savings accounts were tied to an old family trust structure my grandfather had established when I turned 21, the underlying capital was legally classified as separate, non-marital property. Sienna had spent years believing she was managing our shared future, but she had actually only been playing with the auxiliary lines of credit, the very accounts Finch was now systematically isolating. By the 3rd week, the forensic team discovered that Tristan Cole's landscaping firm had been facing a severe liquidity crisis prior to securing the contract on our backyard. He had over-leveraged his business on a failed commercial development project in upstate South Carolina, and Sienna had been using my good credit rating to sign off on emergency equipment leases under the guise of our residential renovation. Every premium stone block, every custom timber pillar, And every truckload of high-end masonry material arriving at our property was wrapped in a paper trail that proved deliberate financial fraud and the dissipation of marital funds. I watched the progress through our kitchen window every Saturday morning. Tristan would stand by his truck clipboard in hand shouting orders to his crew, while wearing a premium titanium watch I had found a digital receipt for in Sienna's cloud backup. Sometimes he would catch me looking through the glass. He would offer a friendly, reassuring wave, perhaps thinking about how incredibly gullible I was, how easy it was to take a man's money and his wife at the exact same time. I would simply raise my coffee mug in return, silently thanking him for enhancing the appraisal value of my asset with his own sweat and desperation. The tipping point arrived on a humid Thursday evening in late July. I was sitting at the dining table pretending to review logistical flowcharts on my tablet when Sienna walked in carrying an elegant silver-embossed envelope. Her eyes were bright with that familiar predatory excitement she always wore when she was about to execute a major lie. "Gavin, look what came in the mail," she said, dropping the envelope onto my paperwork. "It's an exclusive invitation to the Southeastern Hospitality Developers Summit in Savannah. It's a 3-day weekend event starting next Thursday. If I can secure a partnership with the regional hotel chains there, my firm will double its revenue by the end of the year." I picked up the heavy cardstock, turning it over in my hands. The dates lined up perfectly with our upcoming wedding anniversary, the exact weekend she had promised we would spend at a quiet cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. "Savannah," I murmured, keeping my tone perfectly neutral. Almost thoughtful. "That's a massive opportunity, Sienna. But isn't that our anniversary weekend?" She immediately dropped to her knees beside my chair, placing her hands gently on my thighs, her face a perfect portrait of affectionate regret. "I know, sweetie, and it absolutely breaks my heart to even ask this. But this is the big break we've been praying for. If I land these clients, we can pay off the remainder of the construction loans by Christmas. We can celebrate our anniversary the following weekend, I promise. I'll make it up to you." Looking down at her, I felt a profound sense of closure. The manipulation was so smooth, so effortless, it was almost beautiful in its wickedness. She wasn't just planning a romantic weekend getaway with Tristan using my money. She was using our actual anniversary as the cover story to maximize her timeline before filing her own divorce papers. "Go," I said, offering a soft smile while gently tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. "You've worked too hard on this expansion to let a networking opportunity like this slip away. I'll stay here, look after the house, and make sure the contractors finish up the final details." The relief that washed over her face was instantaneous. She kissed me deeply, a frantic, victorious kiss, before rushing upstairs to begin coordinating her wardrobe for the trip. The moment her bedroom door shut, I pulled out my secondary phone and dialed Attorney Finch. "It's happening next Thursday," I said without greeting him. "She's taking the trip to Savannah." "Excellent," Finch replied, his voice calm, steady, and utterly devoid of emotion. "The final appraisal on the property was submitted to the county clerk this morning. The valuation has officially peaked. I will have the court orders finalized by Monday afternoon. We will execute the asset freeze the exact moment her vehicle crosses the state line into Georgia." The remaining days passed in a blur of silent logistics. While Sienna was busy packing her designer dresses and coordinating travel itineraries with Tristan through their hidden chat logs, I was quietly meeting with a private moving crew at a storage facility 3 miles away. I didn't touch a single piece of furniture we had purchased together. I didn't touch her clothes, her jewelry, or the expensive decor she loved to flaunt on her social media pages. I only packed what was legally mine, my grandfather's antique desk, my personal wardrobe, my technical equipment, and the original corporate documents establishing my sole ownership of the land. On Thursday morning, the weather was suffocatingly hot, the air thick with the promise of an afternoon thunderstorm. I stood on the wraparound porch, watching the moving truck pull away from the curb after a stealthy 2-hour packing operation, while Sienna was downtown running last-minute errands. The house behind me was entirely intact, yet completely hollowed out of my presence. At noon, her white SUV pulled into the driveway. She climbed out dressed in a stunning linen outfit, her sunglasses pushed up into her hair. She gave me a quick, distracted hug in the foyer, her mind clearly already miles away on the highway down to Georgia. "I have to hit the road before the rush hour traffic locks up the interstate," she said, checking her watch, the exact same brand as the one she had bought for Tristan. "Are you sure you're going to be okay here by yourself for the weekend, Gavin?" "Don't worry about me," I said, walking her out to the porch, my voice echoing slightly in the humid air. "I have a lot of data to process this weekend. I think it's going to be a very productive couple of days for both of us." "I love you, babe. See you Sunday night," she called out, stepping into the driver's seat and pulling the door shut. I stood on the top step of the porch, my hands buried deep in my pockets, watching the white vehicle coast down the suburban street until it vanished around the corner toward the highway entrance. The silence that settled over the neighborhood was immense, heavy, and absolute. I pulled my phone from my pocket, unlocked the screen, and opened the smart home application, watching the digital security log refresh as the main garage door slowly clicked shut into its steel frame. The quiet vibration of my phone inside my palm broke the eerie stillness of the empty driveway. It wasn't a call, it was a simple, automated text notification from a private geolocation tracking service that Attorney Finch had integrated into our legal strategy. The data grid confirmed that the white SUV had just crossed the South Carolina-Georgia state line. The trap was officially sprung. With a single steady tap on my screen, I forwarded a confirmation code to Finch's personal secure line, authorizing his team to file the emergency court petitions immediately. Within 60 seconds, the entire financial infrastructure that Sienna took for granted began to freeze over like a sudden winter storm. The joint lines of credit vanished from her digital wallet. The auxiliary corporate accounts she used to fund her lifestyle were suspended, and a professional process server waiting in the lobby of the Savannah Boutique Hotel received the green light to deliver a mountain of legal reality. I didn't stay behind to watch the dark summer storm clouds finish gathering over the Charlotte suburbs. I climbed into my own truck, which was loaded only with my grandfather's antique desk, my clothes, and my technical equipment, and drove toward a modest rented apartment on the opposite side of the city. I had intentionally left the house looking perfectly intact, a beautiful staging-ready illusion of a home. I wanted the physical environment to mimic the psychological state she had kept me in for months. I wanted her to walk into a space that looked flawless from the outside, but was entirely hollowed out of my presence. By 9 o'clock that evening, the digital shockwaves began hitting my notification screen, cutting through the silence of my new small living room. It started with a flurry of frantic text messages from Sienna, her usual polished composure fracturing with every character. "Gavin, there's an embarrassing glitch with the bank cards. The front desk here is saying our primary account is flagged for suspicious activity. Call me right now." 10 minutes later, the text lost all pretense of confusion, shifting into a jagged, desperate edge of pure panic. "The corporate MasterCard just declined at the restaurant, too. Tristan had to cover it, but his card is locked out now as well. What did you do to the bank accounts, Gavin? I can't even check into our room. Answer your phone." I didn't reply. I sat at my small kitchen table, staring out the window at the heavy North Carolina rain, watching my phone screen light up on a relentless loop. I didn't feel a surge of petty joy. All I felt was a profound, exhausting sense of finality. The true climax of our 6-year marriage didn't happen during a loud, dramatic screaming match in our kitchen. It unfolded under the sterile fluorescent lights of a luxury hotel lobby in Georgia, where a licensed process server walked up to Sienna and handed her a thick manila envelope in front of a stunned Tristan Cole. Inside that envelope was a comprehensive ironclad reality check. It contained the complete, unedited transcripts of the forensic financial audit, high-definition digital prints of her secret cloud photos, the detailed call logs tracking her 8:33 a.m. routine, and a temporary restraining order that froze every single asset she intended to weaponize against me. But the absolute centerpiece of the legal filing, the definitive twist that she never saw coming, was the structural layout of our property deed. Because the land and the original colonial house had been fully paid for by my grandfather's family trust decades before I even met her, the entire estate was legally classified as inherited separate non-marital property under North Carolina law. By spending the last 6 months encouraging Tristan to pour his firm's remaining capital labor and premium masonry into building that magnificent backyard pavilion and pool oasis, she hadn't been constructing a golden parachute to secure her freedom. She had unknowingly spent her lover's last remaining business resources to drastically maximize the appraisal value of my sole asset. She had built a monument to her own betrayal, and legally she couldn't touch a single stone of it. The structural collapse of her plan was total and immediate. By midnight, the text messages stored on my secondary phone shifted from angry, arrogant demands into absolute pathetic begging. The reality of her situation had finally broken through her vanity. Tristan's business partner, who had been quietly supplied with ironclad proof of Tristan embezzling corporate funds and using company accounts to finance personal romantic getaways, filed for emergency corporate liquidation first thing Friday morning. Tristan was instantly terminated from his own firm, stripped of his operational licenses, and thrust into an aggressive corporate lawsuit. The wealthy, sophisticated savior Sienna thought she had chosen was nothing more than an over-leveraged fraud, and his safety net had vanished into thin air. Sienna returned to Charlotte 48 hours later, not in a victorious wave of corporate triumph, but in the passenger seat of a cheap rented economy vehicle because her leased luxury SUV financed through an account directly tied to the frozen marital assets had been flagged for immediate repossession. She unlocked the front door of our house, walking into an environment that looked utterly perfect, featuring a world-class outdoor pavilion in the backyard, but inside the air was cold and dead. I had blocked her identity across every communication channel, leaving her with absolutely no way to look into my eyes, hear my voice, or attempt to manipulate my emotions ever again. Every question she had, every desperate plea for closure, had to be processed through the clinical, unyielding filter of attorney Raymond Finch. She was left standing entirely alone in an empty suburban shell, realizing too late that a lifetime of security history and devotion had been completely dissolved by the echo of a 12-second mistake. Several months have passed since that definitive summer storm. The divorce proceedings were finalized with a quiet, devastating efficiency. Faced with a flawless forensic paper trail and the undeniable reality of asset dissipation, her defense team collapsed and she walked away with nothing but her clothes and a massive mountain of legal debt. I still live in the Charlotte area, often sitting out on that wraparound porch on quiet, clear evenings, watching the sun set behind the completed masonry of the pavilion. The air finally feels clean, light, and deeply honest. Looking back, reclaiming my life wasn't about the cheap satisfaction of a vengeful ambush. It was about the quiet, unyielding preservation of my own dignity and self-worth. When you realize someone is actively plotting to destroy you under the guise of love, survival becomes your only data point. Trust is a beautiful, fragile thing. It takes a lifetime of shared sacrifices, late-night conversations, and quiet promises to build. But it only takes 12 seconds of pure arrogance to turn it completely to ash. You should never, under any circumstances, let someone make you feel guilty for walking away to protect your own peace of mind. Now that you've heard the final pieces of this puzzle fall into place, I want to open up a real honest discussion in the comments section below. Because a story like this always divides people down the middle. On one side of the room, many of you will argue that my cold, calculated, and entirely silent strategy was completely justified. You'll say that when a spouse deliberately attempts to financially cripple you while violating the sanctity of your home, they completely forfeit any right to a diplomatic conversation or a gentle exit. But on the other side, there are those who believe that a silent exit is simply too cruel, that regardless of the scale of her deception, I should have confronted her the very minute I heard that first voicemail recording, rather than allowing the drama to play out into a financial trap. Where do you stand on this spectrum? Was my response a necessary act of legal self-defense, or did it cross the line into something too cold? Drop your thoughts below. I read through every single comment to hear your perspectives. And if this journey reminded you of the absolute importance of knowing your own worth, please hit that like button, share this video with someone who might be trapped in an illusion of their own, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next raw, real-life storytime narrative. Thank you for spending your time with me tonight, and stay safe out there.